Well, hello again, and welcome to another edition of Addiction. Got a minute? It's February 1st, 2019. This is episode 11, and it is cold, huh? Cold around the country, negative 70 something in Fargo, or oh my Lord. I really am amazed that we're seeing near record breaking temperatures again, but listen, whether we really don't, there's no control about that, so we're going to dig in and do our best. And speaking of doing our best, I'm introducing Patti Pike today. Patti, hello.
Good morning, Howie. How are you
Patti,
this morning?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. And Patti is an interventionist who has Can-Am Interventions. She's been on the show before, but today we're going to talk about the work that Patti does directly. She's based both in San Francisco and British Columbia, up in Vancouver. And it's interesting that she does a lot of work both in Canada and the U.S. And the importance of that, of course, is the fact that there's a lot going on in Canada, which is a little bit ahead of the U.S. Patti, wouldn't you say that's true?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in Canada. Yeah, I was just in Alberta last week, and Alberta actually has got one of the highest rates of overdose on fentanyl right now throughout Alberta. So, Calgary has got the highest rate of overdoses from fentanyl within the Alberta capital.
Well, that means that you are right in the you're right in the depth of it. So it's good to see that you're there. It's wonderful to be working with you. Now let's just cut to the chase. You've been doing intervention. You've been involved in the intervention industry for how long?
Yeah, so I've been working in the addiction and mental health field for 26 years. Primarily, in the beginning, I really worked a lot I worked in Vancouver, British Columbia, in the downtown east side, which is it's an area of the city of Vancouver that is entrenched with drug addiction and, mental health. So that was kind of where I started. But as I kind of moved through the process of working in this field, I have worked in inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment, community-based treatment. I've worked with a diverse community, in terms of, First Nation population. I worked with folks that had, that's come out of the cycle of abuse, and really worked in an outpatient program with various doctors, helping and supporting First Nation population. And I did that for almost 5 years as well. So I would say it's been 9 years that I sort of hung my hat up, sort of in the treatment world as far as, out there in the trenches, and decided to kind of bridge into another area, with the interventions and working with families. I think it's been 9 years now,
Okay.
just a little over 9 years.
Fair enough. And with all that experience, that's brought you to a level where you're now offering guidance and instruction. You actually held a course last week, am I right?
Yeah, that's right. I do a lot of things. I'm an interventionist. That means I work with the families, also, advocating for the families to get well, and also advocating for untreated folks to help them get into treatment. And when I say into treatment, that mostly it's inpatient treatment, but not in all cases does a person want to even go to an inpatient treatment program. They may start off with an outpatient treatment program. And also what I think it was about 5 years ago that I put together a curriculum, a manual with 6 modules related to interventions and case management. My goal really was in the beginning to really focus on, inspiring and educating the professional community, having a specialization in teaching folks how to intervene on a loved one, and really bringing that to professionals in the community, and trying to stay in Canada. And that was kind of what my goal was. It was to really try and just do most of my trainings in Canada. So yes, last week I did my first training in Calgary, Alberta. And the interesting part of that one was I had been working for almost 3 years consistently to try and facilitate an intervention training in Calgary. I just didn't have a lot of resources in Calgary, Alberta. There's not a lot of resources in Calgary, Alberta, in terms of treatment, in terms of some of the resources that we have here in San Francisco, or even in Vancouver, British Columbia. It's more, there's a lot more resources. But in Calgary, Alberta, I was just really humbled and just really grateful that I was able to make a connection with some folks there in the last year. And, I had 25 folks that work in the addiction and mental health field attend my training. So it was just amazing. It was an amazing 3-day experience to educate and again, to inspire the professional community.
Well, it's impressive that you had 25 people. That's really, that's quite a lot. Out of the 25 people, how many of them are actively performing interventions?
There were, let's see, 1, 2, 3, maybe 3 people out of that 25 folks that attended the training.
And what did the other people do who were in the training other than interventions?
That's a good question. So there were like folks that were executive directors of several different programs in Alberta and other provinces in Canada. So there was a couple of CEOs. There were probably, I would think, maybe 10 addiction counselors. And there were also, there was an attorney, and she was also worked as a case manager, a family case manager, and also a placement specialist and placing folks into treatment. There were a couple of family group facilitators that were, and that was one of the things that really inspired me was there was 2 of them, group facilitators that were facilitating family 5-week sessions, a 5-week kind of curriculum of family groups, and for not just the center that this one specific lady worked at, but she actually had a go-to meeting, and she was inviting people from the outlining communities that could not, that were sort of like up near Alaska, or that were really, in the outlining areas of not just Alberta, but, in British Columbia or Winnipeg. And so there was families that were participating in this sort of go-to meeting online sort of application that were participating in this whole sort of 5-week curriculum, family engagement, education. And I was very inspired by that, and so there was a couple of folks there that was involved in that. And there was also a couple of therapists there as well. There was one specifically, she facilitated EMDR, and then there was also an equine therapist there as well. So there was kind of a mixed bag. And there was also like a couple of folks that were recovery coaches, and another guy that came there from Vancouver, British Columbia. He had worked in the field for many years, and he was sort of bridging out to start his own private practice in interventions. And so he was very inspiring as well. So, every person in that room, in that group, just really were inspired. We're actually into, working with families or individual patients that were suffering from addiction or mental health.
truly the
So it
interesting
was
thing.
really inspiring.
I can believe it. Truly, the really interesting aspect about what you're sharing is the diversity of responsibilities that the people who came to your sessions were focused on. When you talk about the one group that I'm most interested in right now for a moment, placement specialists, describe their roles a little more clearly.
So a placement specialist is really someone that is very familiar with the uh, treatment world, if you will, and someone that has a specialty in, not so much working. Well, some folks will work for a treatment program, but if that's sort of, I mean, this lady's role was really, doing an assessment on folks, facilitating an assessment and trying to place them into different treatment programs in Canada and the United States. So it's someone that, is still providing a professional service and making sure that they get that person to the right treatment program.
Do they work for a specific insurance group or a treatment center or a hospital, or are they independent?
Yeah, well, some are independent, and specifically this one woman, she was, but there's many that I have met, along the way that are working for, different treatment programs and mostly inpatient treatment programs. You will find a treatment specialist or a treatment placement person.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. One of the things that I want to make clear is when you talk to people about this term we call intervention, we need to create a new phrase, a new term, and a new emotional connection to the process of helping somebody motivate to take change. And a lot of times, most of the time, this can be done with them there in the process. And then they can take action by going to outpatient or intensive outpatient groups or some combination. It doesn't always mean that you need to go to an inpatient hospital. A lot of times this can be done really very much as sidestepping one piece of the way. Now, there's no two ways about it. There are folks who, when you do the pre-meeting and you learn about them, they are going to be, you learn that they're going to be resistant. And it's going to be really hard for them, if given time to prepare, it would be really hard for them to see the motivation and to take the steps. So it's more appropriate, or it seems more effective, to do it, but with the family's organization, their strength, their concern, their compassion. So it can be, it can be done very softly. So it's not really at all the kind of thing which people fear. There's so many other ways. I mean, we talk about different styles of intervention, which it's funny, when you and I spoke a few weeks ago, actually a few months ago, and we were with Arthur Westinghouse at the time, one of the things we've laughed about repeatedly is when you get engaged and you're going to take action, you throw out the book. You're going to use what's best. You're going to use the resources you have. Talk about your experience with that in the last few minutes that we have.
Yeah, I really like to kind of talk about, like, part of my training is that I really try and bring in some mock intervention cases, and each group will be given a mock intervention case, and that is the case that they really need to study throughout the 3-day intervention process, how they are going to facilitate an intervention, what roles each person plays, what treatment program is the individual going to get, where's that person going to get referred to, and what is the aftercare and case management look like, And so one of the cases that I really liked at the training was the one group, they actually did a hybrid intervention approach. And so what that meant is that they really wanted to educate the family, and but they were really kind of concerned on whether they needed to invite the identified patient, into the initial education piece at the intervention process. So what they decided to do was that it would be an invitation approach intervention, which means that the family would invite the identified patient into the intervention process. But in specifically this case, the interventionist met with the family initially. They talked about the process of how they were going to facilitate an intervention on this identified patient. And so what they decided to do was, for the 2-day process, for the following 2-day process, they would engage the family in education, engage the family in process group. And then in the last 2 hours of the intervention, that they would invite the individual to come to the intervention, but not have him at the actual first two, like the first, the stages of education and process, because we felt, or the group felt that, by inviting him in, he may be drunk, he may be like intoxicated to the point that he may not be able to sustain sitting there for 2 days and families going over family history, interventionists, educating the family system about alcoholism and addictions and mental health and on and on. So what they decided to do, they facilitated the education piece and process piece, and then the family invited the person to come to the intervention, and so he came in at the very end part. And so the family also put together letters. They did put together 2 letters. The first letter, asking the person to accept treatment, if they were concerned about them. And then the second letter, if the person, if the identified patient did not agree to go to treatment, that they would, read these second letters, which were the bottom line letters, and, at the end of that case, that mock case, the person did accept treatment, and we sent him to a treatment program that was going to deal specifically with alcoholism, as well as trauma and PTSD. So those were all kind of, that's a very quick kind of presentation of really what happened in that case. But that I really liked that approach a lot. I think that was a very, it was very, I liked it. I liked how they played it out, and they came up with that. So.
Well, while the program is being developed, the concept of intervention, while the different philosophies are being implemented and changing and growing, we're seeing better views, better best practices, more standardized approaches, things which are truly beginning to work out well. So in the weeks to come, I hope to share with you what I learned. I'm going off for training on yet another style of intervention,
Yes.
and I look forward to talking to you about that when I get back. But we've come to the end of our allotted time today, and I'm going to ask Patti quickly, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, thank you, Howie. So folks can get in touch with me, and this is my website, www.canan, interventions, interventions.com. And you can also reach out to me via telephone or text, 415-827-3725.
Really appreciate Patti being on the show today, and it gives you an idea of the kind of insight that goes on behind the process. There are many steps involved, there are many people involved, and a lot of planning beforehand turns into a really beneficial work and a better outcome. So if anyone has any questions about this, please, you can reach me. My website you can find howiemarlin.com. So on behalf of Patti Pike, Michael Blanchard, who will be with us next week, and myself, Howie Marlin, this has been Addiction Got a Minute. We'll see you next week. If we all drip one drop of sanity into the bucket of our society, we might just leave this world in a better place. I wish you warm breezes and smooth sailing.